everyone. Get ready for a deep dive. We're jumping into Genesis 32 today.
Oh, yeah.
And Genesis 32.
I think it's safe to say it's a chapter full of family drama.
Oh, yeah.
Some intense emotions.
No, sure.
And even a little bit of mystery.
It's got it all, doesn't it? I mean, this is where we find Jacob. You remember Jacob, right? From the earlier stories? He's about to come face to face with his brother Esau again, after years of being apart.
Yeah, and let's not forget the backstory here, because
it's a doozy.
years ago, Jacob tricked Esau out of his birthright. So, there's some serious baggage between these two.
Absolutely. And the text doesn't shy away from it at all. Jacob is straight up terrified of what Esau might do.
But what's so interesting to me is that Jacob doesn't just sit around, right? He doesn't just wait for Esau to show up. He takes action.
Right,
and
he does.
It's not just about running away. I mean, he comes up with this whole plan to try and smooth things over with his brother.
Multi-layered plan, even.
Okay, so let's break this down.
What exactly are we talking about here?
So first, he sends messengers ahead.
Right.
But these aren't just any messengers. They have this very carefully crafted message, like they're coached to address Esau with tons of respect. But here's where things get really clever. Jacob takes all his people, all his possessions, and splits them into two separate groups.
Oh, okay.
The idea is, if Esau attacks one group, the other one might have a chance to escape.
That's
Very smart, huh?
It is clever. I got to hand it to him. It shows that he's really thinking strategically about keeping his family safe.
Right.
But it also makes you wonder if this is all just coming from a place of fear. Or is there some genuine remorse in there?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think it really gets to the heart of why Jacob is such a complex and interesting character. I mean, he's a mix of cunning, anxiety, and even faith.
Speaking of faith, this is where we get to Jacob's prayer, right?
Mm-hmm.
He pours his heart out to God, acknowledges what he did in the past, and begs for protection.
Exactly. It's powerful stuff. Jacob goes back and recounts how God has been faithful to him in the past, basically saying, look, you promised to bless me and my descendants. Please don't let this encounter with Esau ruin everything.
It's almost like he's wrestling with God on an emotional level.
Oh, like...
Even before we get to the actual wrestling match later in the chapter.
You're totally right, because it highlights how this isn't some quick, God help me out kind of prayer. It's raw, honest, and deeply personal.
Right.
Jacob isn't afraid to admit his flaws or how desperately he needs God to step in.
So we've got Jacob taking practical steps, praying like crazy, but there's still this huge cloud of uncertainty hanging over him.
Yep.
And then we get to this passage, one of the most bizarre, most debated in the whole Bible. The wrestling match.
Oh, yeah. This one throws people for a loop. It's like, what's going on?
Jacob is alone at night. And all of a sudden he's grappling with this mysterious man until the sun comes up.
Right.
Hold on. Who is this man?
I know. It's strange.
It doesn't really say, does it?
It's intentionally vague, right? Some scholars think it's an angel. Others say it's a theophany, which is, a direct manifestation of God.
Wow.
And that vagueness is part of what makes this passage so fascinating.
It definitely raises a lot of questions about faith and how we connect with the divine. It's not just, a polite chat with God.
Yeah. This is intense.
It's a full-on struggle.
It is.
And Jacob is changed afterwards, both physically and spiritually.
And the man even gives him a new name, right? Israel, which, it literally means he struggles with God.
So this isn't just some random event, this name change.
Not at all.
It's packed with meaning. And it sets the stage for everything that happens with Jacob's descendants.
Huge implications.
What do you think about the fact that this encounter with God leaves Jacob with a permanent limp?
It's such a powerful image, don't you think?
It is.
It suggests that even when we experience God's presence, it can be tough, maybe even painful, but the impact of that encounter, it stays with us.
It's interesting how this detail about the limp connects to a later tradition among the Israelites.
Oh, right.
They weren't allowed to eat the sciatic tendon, which is the very tendon that Jacob injured during the wrestling match.
Isn't that wild? So a story about this personal encounter with God becomes woven into a cultural practice for generations to come.
That is wild.
Yeah.
It shows just how powerful these stories can be.
Really does.
Well, we've covered schemes, prayers, a mysterious wrestling match. It's clear that Jacob is going through a major transformation here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He is. Big time. And now, after all that, after the wrestling match, Jacob finally comes face to face with Esau.
Okay, so now I'm really on the edge of my seat here. We've got Esau marching towards him with 400 men.
Uh-huh.
What happens next?
Right.
I mean, does he attack?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
All that buildup, all the fear. And then Esau runs to meet Jacob.
Oh, wow.
And get this, they hug, they embrace, and they're both weeping. It's this powerful moment of reconciliation.
I did not see that coming.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
It is.
And you got to wonder, maybe deep down, Esau had already forgiven Jacob.
Yeah?
You know, maybe all those years apart had softened his heart.
Now that is a beautiful thought.
It is.
But let's not forget, Jacob did send those lavish gifts ahead.
Oh, right.
I mean, maybe that's part of why Esau reacted the way he did.
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting how the text really highlights this moment, right?
Yeah.
Esau asks about the gifts, and Jacob's servants are very careful to say, these are from your servant Jacob, to my lord Esau.
So even in this moment of reconciliation, Jacob is still using that same strategy, that humility, that deference.
Absolutely.
He's not taking any chances.
No, he's not.
But then we get this strange little exchange.
Yeah.
Esau tells Jacob, I have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. Why would he refuse such an extravagant gift? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
It's a curious detail, isn't it? And scholars have debated it for centuries. Some think it's genuine generosity on Esau's part. Others say, maybe it's a power move. Like he's saying, look, I don't need anything from you. I'm already wealthy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right.
It's like he's subtly reasserting his dominance, even though he's forgiving Jacob.
Exactly. Adds another layer to their reconciliation. And Jacob, always the strategist, he insists that Esau accepts the gift. He says it will ensure favor in your eyes.
So there's still this underlying tension, even in this, what seems like heartwarming reunion.
Yeah, definitely.
What happens next? Do they, become best friends after this?
Well, Esau suggests they settle down near each other.
Okay.
But Jacob, he plays it safe again. He says his flocks are too weak from traveling and they can't keep up with Esau.
Is he being truthful? Or is this another one of his clever maneuvers?
It's hard to say for sure. Some commentators think Jacob still doesn't fully trust Esau.
Right.
He wants to keep a little distance just in case.
So the chapter ends then
Yeah.
with this lingering uncertainty about their future relationship.
It does. It's not a neat and tidy ending, is it? No. Genesis 32 leaves us with more questions than answers. I think that's part of what makes it so brilliant.
It definitely keeps us thinking. Before we wrap up, I want to go back to that moment where Jacob gets renamed to Israel.
Okay.
What's the significance of that name change? Especially in light of everything else that happens in this chapter.
It's huge. This isn't just a personal transformation for Jacob. This new name, Israel, meaning he struggles with God, it sets the stage for the future identity of his descendants.
Oh, wow.
The entire nation of Israel.
So this wrestling match, this struggle, it becomes a defining characteristic of all people.
Precisely. And I think it speaks to something universal about faith. You know, we often think of faith as this straight path, but sometimes it means wrestling, questioning, even challenging God.
And that's okay.
It is. In fact, this story suggests that wrestling with God can actually be a sign of a deep and real relationship.
Jacob's limp is this constant reminder of that struggle. It becomes a symbol of his transformed relationship with God.
Absolutely.
And as we talked about earlier, it shapes cultural practices for generations.
It really does. It's amazing how this chapter brings together these personal struggles, family dynamics, even national identity.
It really does. And it raises some interesting questions for us, too, as we read this. What are we wrestling with in our own lives? How do our experiences, good and bad, shape who we are in our relationship with God?
Those are good questions.
Genesis 32 isn't just some ancient story.
No, it's not.
It's an invitation to think about our own journeys of faith and transformation. You know, it's incredible how much there is to unpack from just one chapter of Genesis. Genesis 32 really is something else, isn't it?
It is. It's amazing. We've seen Jacob at his most manipulative, his most scared, and in the end, his most vulnerable. And through it all, you get this feeling that he's being molded and refined by all these encounters, both with his brother and with God.
And what strikes me is how this story, even though it happened thousands of years ago, still feels so relevant today. I mean, these themes, family conflict, forgiveness, wrestling with your faith, those are things we all deal with in some way.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder that these aren't just, abstract ideas, that they're part of the human experience woven into our faith tradition, going all the way back to the beginning.
Speaking of faith tradition, it's worth pointing out that Genesis 32 isn't just a story on its own.
Right.
It's part of this much bigger story, this narrative of God's covenant with his people.
Exactly. Jacob's journey with all its ups and downs is ultimately part of God's plan to bless all nations through his descendants. And that name change from Jacob to Israel, it becomes crucial in that plan.
It's like this turning point, not just for Jacob personally, but for his whole lineage. His descendants will become known as the Israelites, carrying that legacy of the name he struggles with God.
Yeah. And that legacy isn't just about struggle. It's about God's faithfulness, too. Even when Jacob messes up, even when he's scared or scheming, God doesn't give up on him.
It's such a powerful reminder that God can use even flawed, broken people to do amazing things. Wow. It's a message that I think really resonates with a lot of people today.
Definitely. And there's another layer to this idea of struggling. We often think of faith as having all the answers, being totally sure. But Jacob's story suggests that sometimes faith means questioning, wrestling, even arguing with God.
And that those struggles can actually lead us to a stronger, more genuine relationship with him.
Exactly. It's not about blindly obeying or pretending we have it all figured out. It's about being honest with God, even when we're confused, angry, or full of doubt.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Genesis 32, what are some key takeaways that we can apply to our own lives?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is the importance of honesty and reconciliation. Jacob went to great lengths to make things right with Esau after betraying him. It's a reminder that we can't just run from our mistakes. We have to face them, own up to them, and seek forgiveness.
We also see the power of prayer. Jacob really poured his heart out to God, expressing his fears and worries. It reminds us that we can always turn to God for help no matter what we're going through.
Absolutely. And even when those challenges seem impossible, even when we feel like we're wrestling with God himself, we can hold on to the promise that he's with us. He doesn't leave us in our struggles.
That's a really comforting thought. So if you're listening and you're going through a tough time, whether it's a relationship, a setback, or even just questioning your faith, remember, you're not alone.
Jacob's story shows us that even in the darkest moments, there's always hope. There's always the chance for change, for a new beginning.
And who knows? You might even come out of your own wrestling match with a new name, a new understanding of yourself, and a deeper connection to God.
That's a great way to put it.
This has been a truly incredible deep dive into Genesis 32. I hope it's given you something to think about and maybe even inspired you to go back and read this powerful chapter for yourself.
And if you want to keep exploring the Bible with us, we'd love for you to join us for more episodes of Bible Talks on WBCM Radio. You can find new releases on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/Radio WBCMM and on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the usual places.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. While you're on our YouTube channel, check out our reviews of Christian music from different genres. Maybe you'll find your new favorite artist. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.